You are listening to In Conversation with Jennie and Mark.
Well, hello. Welcome to another week of In Conversation with Jennie and Mark. I'm the Reverend Mark Adams, Vicar of St Margaret's Church, Barking.
And I'm the Reverend Jennie Adams, Vicar of, where am I? Holy Trinity, Prince Consort Road, South Kensington.
Where am I? I don't know. It's out there
Where
somewhere.
am I?
It's out there somewhere. It's only got the Royal Albert Hall next door. It's fine. It's easy to miss.
Well, absolutely. It's a very important place. So this week, there are two gospel readings appointed for this week, and we've realised that you're doing one and I'm doing the other. But there is only one Acts reading. So let's talk about.
Yeah, I think it's
and I'm going to
quite good to carry on looking through a story of Acts, isn't it? We did it last week. I preached on it last Sunday, so I think I was probably tempted to do that as well, because I think it's quite good to carry on.
Yes, it's the one time you can really follow the story of Acts, isn't it? Otherwise, you just get Bob. So
yeah. So we are going to do our reading. It's from Acts chapter 16. The lectionary reading is set from verse 9, but actually I think we're going to read from verse 6. Is that right? Partly because that's what the book says.
Read from verse 6.
But actually, I think it gives a little bit more of interesting context as well. So let's and I think we're allowed to add some little bits on. I don't think that's the worst thing you can do. So anyway, here we go. Jennie, I think you're going to read it, yeah?
I wasn't, but I will.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Well, you carry
on. From verse 6. They went through the region of Phrygia and Galatia, having been forbidden by the Holy Spirit to speak the word in Asia. When they had come opposite Mysia, they attempted to go into Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them. So passing by Mysia, they went down to Troas. During the night, Paul had a vision. There stood a man of Macedonia pleading with him and saying, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." When he had seen the vision, we immediately tried to cross over to Macedonia, being convinced that God had called us to proclaim the good news to them. We set sail from Troas and took a straight course to Samothrace, the following day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. We remained in this city for some days. On the Sabbath day, we went outside the gate by the river, where we supposed there was a place of prayer, and we sat down and spoke to the women who had gathered there. A certain woman named Lydia, a worshipper of God, was listening to us. She was from the city of Thyatira and a dealer in purple cloth. The Lord opened her heart to listen eagerly to what was said by Paul. When she and her household were baptized, she urged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come and stay at my home." And she prevailed upon us. I have two things I think we should discuss.
Okay.
The first is Paul's visions.
Okay.
And the second, I think how you perceive Lydia really alters or shapes how you view this passage of what's happened. So we'll get back to it, but I want to know what you've got in your mind when you talk about Lydia, really.
Okay. That's interesting. I'm not sure that I've got anything in my mind at this particular moment, but anything comes into my mind later on.
Well, obviously I have, but I think it shapes how I hear the passage. So yeah.
Okay, so where should we start then? So I think it was interesting to look at coming into Paul's vision. I think it's interesting to have that little bit of extra context. And in fact, I think when I do this passage on Sunday, I might add that in because we print it on the notice sheet ourselves. So I might just start from verse 6 because I think it does give that little bit of extra context. So I think it's really important.
Trying to put all those places in there. Yeah, great.
Well, that's true. I must admit, I did suddenly feel when you started reading it, I thought, oh, it's got lots of nice place names, which is sort of slightly better than Old Testament names of people. But yeah, so it's a fascinating moment, isn't it? Because they don't seem to have any call up to this point to go to Greece. And this is another really significant moment actually in the story of the spread of is a really significant moment actually in the story of the spread of Christianity. But nonetheless, they don't seem to have any call themselves or feel any other than they've got this sort of vague idea that the Spirit of Jesus is stopping them from going everywhere. And, how does that
And what
happen?
do you
Why do
think
they
that
do that?
looked like? When they say it stopped them from going everywhere, what did that mean? Did that
I
mean that
don't
they were
really
stopped
know.
at the borders? They hadn't got
I
the
don't know.
paper.
It's an interesting question about how God guides us, isn't it? How we feel God guides us. Because I suppose it could be practical reasons. There's a Roman legion blocking the road. I don't know.
Oh, no, it is at the borders. Hang on. When they came to the border of Mysia, they tried to enter Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus would not allow them to. So basically, they were stopped at the border.
Well, maybe, or maybe they have an internal feeling that I just don't think we should go there. Or do they have a practical thing that actually
I
stops
think it's
them?
more practical.
You think there's a sort of Roman border guard there?
Yeah, I think if you're not allowed in, then that, we do it ourselves, don't we? We
We
try
do.
this. If it doesn't work, we're assuming that it's because it wasn't supposed to work. And I think,
Yes, and actually, what they're then doing on that reading is that they're kind of assigning that stopping to to the Holy Spirit. I mean, some really interesting little moments in this passage. Actually, I think it's the only time, though somebody might correct me. I'm pretty sure it's the only time where the Holy Spirit is referred to as the Spirit of Jesus, which is, I
oh,
think, noteworthy and interesting from a Trinitarian perspective as we approach Trinity Sunday. But, this is the Spirit of Jesus and it's seen as the Holy Spirit. But I think that's the only time that the Holy Spirit is referred to in that way.
excuse me a minute whilst I just check the authorized version.
Okay. Because you have the authorized version of the Holy Trinity. So we need to make sure that that's what that says. So,
Yes, it doesn't always say the same thing.
so what? You have to check that this is going to be right. So you can draw this point
Well,
out.
there's no point in me saying it's the only time it won't refer to as the Spirit of Jesus if that's not what we've read in the church, is it? What verse is it? Hang on.
Okay. So it's verse
7.
7. So Acts 16, verse 7, the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them to go. The other interesting thing while you're looking up about.
No, the Spirit suffered them not. Doesn't say it. Okay.
Okay, well, there you go. That's a nice point that you can't make then.
Brilliant.
Unless you bring it in another way. I think it's a significant point anyway. So, and you'd have to go back to the Greek to find out whether that's what it says, in which case you could do that. I'm sure it probably does. Anyway,
I'm sure it does because all
the other
authorities-
interesting bit about this passage is that we go mysteriously from them to we. So there's a bit of a sense in which Luke seems to have joined them for
You've
this.
done some reading on this. You did
No,
not.
I know that already. I did know that already,
You
actually, but I did just do a little bit of reading about it. But yes, it's an interesting moment because it goes from them. So did not allow them. And then during the night, Paul has a vision. And when he had seen, we immediately tried to cross over. So it would have
Okay.
been Luke or,
Let's go for let's move to Paul's vision. Okay.
Okay, Paul's vision.
Because
So, okay.
we've done what it looked like for the Spirit of Jesus to not allow them to do something.
Okay, so come on, what's your question?
Paul in the middle of the night has a vision, and we read it so glibly, don't we? Oh, he had a vision and off they went. Okay. Well, last night I dreamt that I was painting my church by numbers, as in the actual church building, brick by brick, all numbered. I'm climbing up ladders to paint the church by numbers. Okay. And also, just as an aside for my dream, I also spent a lot of time moaning at people that there was no point because it was going to look like a church and it already looks like a church.
Okay, so what are you? So is this?
I'm just saying that I don't think I have the same night times that Paul did. And I can't ever imagine having a vision where I got up in the morning and then I travel through a few countries because that's so obviously what it meant to be. I mean, even visions that are really real. You must have had those kind of dreams that you wake up and you're not sure whether they're real.
Well, of course. I mean,
time
yeah,
for
the New
Dr.
Testament
Garden.
is often full of people having
Mm.
guidance through dreams. I'm particularly thinking about Joseph, isn't he, in the early chapters of Matthew? But there's a greater sense of there is
I
a
get
greater
that, but
sense
I think we often just read it as though, oh yeah, okay, he had a dream and off he went. I'm like, really?
Yeah, I think it's easy to. There's so much distance between us and this, isn't there, in a way? And of course, there's even though we're Christians, we don't always think in the same way. we're not always perhaps open as they
Well, I
seem to
think,
be.
I mean, there are churchmanships that do more of this, but even so, they don't seem to get up and take their friends the next day. You would test it out a little bit, wouldn't you? Got to raise some
There's no
money.
doubt here, though, is there? There's
How
an
are they
absolute.
getting there?
And of course, this is a fascinating thing because this is a major move, a major expanding of the horizons, isn't it? Because as I suppose I was reflecting this in my sermon last week with Peter going to Cornelius and the vision, and I know we spoke about that on the podcast last week, but I developed it a little bit more when I was preaching on Sunday, I think, about this. This is a major barrier that's crossed in terms of taking the gospel from the being a purely Jewish movement to include the Gentiles. And in one sense, this is a logical next step of that, isn't it? Because this is coming out of Asia, even as we understand it today. This is Turkey he's in here, as we would understand it. And they cross over from Asia into Europe. So this is a big step that is taken here as a result of this vision. And maybe that's why it's important for Paul and his followers and for Luke recording it, really, that this is something that God has led them to do. It's not something it's very clear this is not something they thought of their own back. They didn't think, oh, let's go to Greece. In fact, there's no sense at all that they're thinking of going to Greece before this vision comes.
Apart from they could have thought that.
They could have done, but they don't.
No, I mean, but it could be, couldn't it? So if we're saying that basically they've been stopped at the border and therefore that is the Spirit of Jesus stopping them going in. I mean, you could also just wake up next morning and go, let's go try Greece.
They could have done, but there's no sense, at least in my reading of the passage, that is what they do. They only do it as a response to this vision. They interpret it as a clear call from God to go to Greece, don't they?
Okay, so they get there and then they wander around a bit.
I think just before we wander around a bit, we perhaps come to that. I think, it is an interesting thing to think about in terms of really being patient, isn't it? And waiting. They have to go through that sort of uncomfortable phase of not really knowing quite what they're doing, wandering aimlessly around. I mean, there's some kind of message in there for us, isn't there?
No. Okay.
Well, I think there is. So you can come and have that thought develop at St Margaret's, or you can go to Holy Trinity and you can. No, it's not part of it. Okay, so that's burst my balloon, isn't it? Right, over to you then, Jenny.
It's probably true. They did seem to spend a lot of time not knowing what they were doing. Okay, they get there. They travel to Philippi, a Roman colony, leading city. They stay there for several days, not really doing very much. So when they get there, I think that's the bit I like. Don't seem to really know what to do they?
No, are they waiting for the Sabbath? So that it says on the Sabbath, and this was a little bit of the reading that I was doing, that obviously, and we know, don't we, from other places that Paul usually
Are
goes.
they waiting because then they know there'll be somewhere to go to talk?
Yeah,
to people?
maybe they're just sussing the place out. They know that there's, Paul's usual method is to go to the synagogue. Maybe there isn't a synagogue, so this is where the people, as far as they know, gather down by the river, because perhaps there isn't a synagogue there. That's what this is not a Mark thought, this is a read in a book thought, but yeah, they go down to the river because that's where the people are gathering. So maybe they're waiting for the Sabbath.
Okay, so down by the river, the women.
Yes. Well,
Does it now become acceptable to talk to women down by a river?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? That is there no men there, or is it just what exactly is going on? So Lydia is an interesting character, isn't she? So you've got some. I don't know. They certainly are open to talking to people, aren't they?
Yeah. So
what's your question about
I
that?
do
What's
have a
your question
picture
about
in my
Lydia?
mind of what Lydia is like. So the little bit I know about dealing in purple cloth is how you make it. I've researched this before, and basically you crush up crustaceans and mix it with urine and dye
Nice.
it. So it's a really, well, exactly. It's not a great trade, apart from purple cloth was worth a lot. So you had to do like the really rough and ready work that nobody really wanted to do. But then you could make decent money from it. And I, in my mind, have a picture of Lydia, and I don't know how to describe it. I've got her exactly like somebody I've met before, actually, at baptism prep up in Stockton-on-Tees. And I would say, I'm going to describe this woman, and then I'm going to contradict myself a little bit. It's okay.
Okay, carry on.
Yeah, all right. So in Stockton, there was quite a high level of unemployment and drugs and all the other things that you would expect with it. When I came across this lady, and I'm going to name her because I'm going to be nice about her. She was called Jodie. She sounded, and all her friends were of that group of people that were, who were sitting in the pub all day, really, with their children, that sort of
Okay.
thing. But Jodie wasn't like them. When I kind of, she was loud, she was quite scary to talk to.
Right.
But the more I spoke to her, the more I realised that Jodie was a businesswoman.
Right.
So she had definitely gone off the rails in earlier life. She had met her partner and fallen in love, and turned her life around. And one of the reasons is she just kept starting businesses, making money. And when they looked as though like that was the next flavour of the, that flavour had gone, she'd start another one. So she had started a party treat business, and she'd started some wedding favour business, so she would go to wedding fairs. And when I met her, she was buying a cocktail bar. She was going to start a cocktail bar in about time. And she was incredibly successful, incredibly hardworking, but she had that demeanor. She knew all these people. If you wanted something done, you asked Jodie. And as I say, I sound as though I'm being a little bit down on her, but I'm not. I was in awe of her, really. Is the best. You wouldn't mess with her.
Right.
No trouble in her bar.
So this is how you see Lydia, is it?
Yeah, I think that kind of loud, brash, but actually really clever and really hardworking. And I guess almost the queen of the women.
Yeah.
If you've converted Lydia, you've converted them all.
I think, there's that idea, isn't there, for people of peace, that you go and you look for people when you go to places and you find someone who's a person of peace. And Lydia, for me, comes across, and maybe that relates to the person you're talking about as well, really comes across as a sort of person of peace. This somebody who's really open to what God is doing. And obviously it says, doesn't it, the Lord opened our heart to listen eagerly to what Paul was saying. So I think, and you obviously know a little more about the whole purple cloth thing than I do. My understanding of it is there, you've got to be pretty wealthy to deal in purple cloth. And there's a reason why purple is a kind of, we think of, bishops and royalty, and, they wear purple because we don't really see it now today, do we, in our sort of mass-produced dyes and stuff. But actually it was a really expensive colour. So therefore there is a sense in which, she is a successful businesswoman, and and she has to be fairly wealthy to be in that kind of trade. That's always been my understanding of Lydia.
Well, I think she's fairly wealthy because she's in that kind of trade.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I don't think. You've got to be able to buy the first crustaceans to brush up. But I think she's wealthy because she's in that kind of trade.
And I think, what does it say to you as a woman that they've got this sort of influential woman that Paul is dealing with?
I've always wanted to be like the picture I've got in my mind, that person that can kind of rally everyone around, and it would be great, wouldn't it? But I'm not. But it does also, I suppose it's not as a woman, it's more as in society. Those people we perhaps least expect or shy away from because they're quite brash and scary. Actually, can be one of the greatest advocates. And I think I particularly see it as like, if you consider me a believer, come to my house, because that's very much as I would be. Come on,
so there's obviously a sense in which she's got a big house that she can put all these travel.
Come on round, love, I'll feed you.
Yeah. So we like the picture of Lydia then. She's an interesting character, isn't she? She's kind of sort of person that's worth reflecting on, person of peace, person who's open to the gospel, person who opens her home, but and influential. And I think that's an interesting point about the influence of women in the early Christianity, isn't it? You know, in this very, very early time of the church developing, you know, women clearly play a massively important role in all that's going on. Paul doesn't seem to be phased or bothered by that at all, does he?
Well, they went out to speak to the women.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's quite an interesting point. He went out to speak to the women. He wasn't speaking to the men, really.
So I suppose there's a sort of, just as a sort of bringing this together, there is an interesting theme that links both these things together, because there's about crossing. Is there a theme here then about sort of crossing barriers? We thought about that last week with the Jew-Gentile thing with Peter and Cornelius, and now we've got Paul going with his companions across from Asia to Europe. And actually, who are the people that he finds there straight away? He finds this group of women, and in a way, we know.
I think it's a continuation of pushing on. If you think don't keep pushing on, because there's a lot of, like, you know, barriers or whatever, just keep going. If you hit a barrier, find some other way.
Yeah.
And the people who hear the word are not always the ones you expect.
No. So actually, quite an interesting passage to reflect on then, isn't it, in our day, and how we can apply that into our own lives. Keep going. Sometimes it feels like you don't know where you're going and you're wandering aimlessly around in Turkey, but actually God is still working purposes through that, and then be open to who you see and what's going on. I think that's a really fascinating sort of message to take from this. So there's some thoughts for us for Sunday then. Thank you. That's really helpful.
It's a wrap.
We hope that you've enjoyed listening to us. Do spread the word, share the link with other people. And we'll be back next week as well. And we'll be back again next week for who knows what. We shall wait as we wander aimlessly for a few more days. That's not true, obviously. But there you go. Anyway, take care, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to In Conversation with Jennie and Mark. Please subscribe for more episodes on all the usual podcast platforms.